So we're live streaming to the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture's Facebook page. So if you can share this meeting with people that aren't able to be here tonight, feel free to do that. Okay. Before we get started, I just want to mention that there's a new documentary out that is made by filmmaker Matt Wexler. It's called The Jungle. Matt did the film Right to Harm about 5 years ago that featured Iowa pretty prominently in there. And The Jungle is a modern day take on Upton Sinclair's 1906 expose, and he also brings in regenerative agriculture as a solution to what we're seeing here with industrial livestock production. So the Iowa Alliance is going to have an online screening on May 1st at 6:30 p.m. I believe it is 7 p.m. I have to check, but Jonathan is going to put a link in the chat and we will send out emails about that as well. But there's a link in the chat for you with more information and for you to register. Okay, so our Four Calls lobby day. So why are we here? The bill failed to progress in the House. So why are we having this meeting tonight and this lobby day on Wednesday? So as you'll learn tonight, there's still a chance the bill can resurface because Bear is not letting up on lobbying in Des Moines, and it plans to lobby until the end of the legislative session. So we can't let up either. And we need to continue to make our voices heard very loudly and very clearly that we don't want this bill in Iowa. Now, Iowa is not the only place where pesticide companies are lobbying hard. As of today, Iowa is one of 11 states where the pesticide immunity bill was introduced. It was introduced in Georgia and North Dakota. Their state legislatures there passed the bills. They're currently awaiting governor's signatures, and the people in those states are advocating pretty hard for a veto. The bill is in Florida and Missouri. It's alive, but it's stalled. Three other states are like Iowa, where the bills are dead, but the session is still ongoing and the bills could be revived. And those states are Oklahoma, Montana, and Tennessee. And finally, in Idaho, Mississippi, and Wyoming, the bills are dead for the year. So those are three that are definitely done for the year. They probably will be back, but they're done for the year. Bayer and other pesticide companies are not only trying to get these bills passed in these states, but they're also trying in various ways to achieve lawsuit immunity through an EPA petition. They've introduced in the past a marker bill with the Farm Bill, and they have a case before the Supreme Court, which may or not be heard. It's been up there a couple of times before. I think this is the third time. So, they even put together a coalition of over 90 chemical and farming organizations called the Modern Ag Alliance to be a front group lobbying for this bill. And I'm sure you've seen signs around the state, billboard signs, and ads on TV or social media from this group. So you can't say they aren't trying, which is why we need to be so proactive. So tonight you're going to hear more about this from all our speakers, all of whom I want to thank for being here tonight. We have Aaron Lehman, Dr. Chuck Benbrook, Seth Watkins, Wade Dooley, and Matt Russell. We're going to start with some presentations. We'll go over a script and who we're targeting, and then we'll have time for your questions. Okay, so with that, let me begin with our first speaker, who's Aaron Lehman. Aaron is a fifth-generation family farmer from near the Polk City area. Aaron is the president of the Iowa Farmers Union, and he's been involved with Iowa Farmers Union in one capacity or another since his teens. So I think you can all say that's incredible dedication. Aaron is going to talk about what this pesticide immunity bill would do, what it wouldn't do, how it could be reintroduced again, and the strategy of who we're targeting. So Aaron, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, it's great to be here, Diane. Thank you so much. The Iowa Farmers Union is dedicated to family farming, sustainable agriculture, and thriving rural communities and healthy landscapes for all Iowans. We are very concerned about this legislation. Senate File 394 is this year's version of the preemption bill, which would provide protection for pesticide manufacturers regarding their liability. So, we know that farming is one of the most dangerous professions, right? Our family farmers are exposed to any number of risks that are inherent with raising food for our communities and our state and our country. And we dedicate ourselves to that, and we take that responsibility to heart. We know that in Iowa, farmers rely on safe, effective herbicides. Unfortunately, the chemicals that farmers use, even when approved by the EPA and described as safe by the manufacturer, have sometimes been proven to cause damage to their health. And farmers have to have the right to defend themselves. Rural residents have the right. All Iowans should have the right to defend their health when chemical companies' products cause this damage. As family farmers, when we're growing food for our communities and our state and our country, we're responsible for that. We can't hide behind a label for the product we produce. Chemical companies should not be allowed to hide behind that label. This legislation creates a liability shield so that even when their products are proven to cause health damage, chemical companies can escape accountability. This bill would take away Iowans' ability to seek relief after they discover an illness or a permanent injury that's been caused by a product that had been labeled as safe, despite clear evidence presented in a court of law. Pesticide companies shouldn't get a free pass for their future liability. Our court system exists to protect us and hold those who cause harm accountable. We should have full access to the courthouse steps, and that shouldn't be taken away from anyone. Our laws instead should protect our farmers and communities instead of pesticide companies. Instead of providing this special protection to pesticide companies, we should promote safer herbicide use by promoting better education efforts and promoting the use of safer chemical formulations of these same chemicals that are now available and being used just as effectively around the world with better protections than we have here. So Senate File 394 has progressed through the House and has made its way through the Senate and through committee and passed on the floor. When it got sent to the House, it encountered such difficulty that it has never even passed a committee in the House. In fact, it's never been brought up for debate in a House committee. Normally, we think that would say the bill is dead because we have passed certain deadlines where bills have to progress. But this is not the case always. Oftentimes, a bill that is so-called dead by the funnel can resurrect. It can become a zombie bill, and it can be attached to another bill that is eligible for debate. And this happens often. In fact, last year, even though the legislature closed at 3 or 4 in the morning on a Saturday morning, it wasn't clear that this bill was dead last year until the very closing hours of the legislative session. There was so much pressure brought to the leadership that there was still a prospect it would be passed in the closing minutes of the legislative session in the dead of night. So we know that they can be resurrected. We want to make sure that all of our Iowa interests in the family farm community, in the rural Iowa community, in the agriculture community, and all of Iowans know that they need to keep the pressure on their lawmakers. And that's why we've made the decision to contact the key legislators who are involved in this debate, House and Senate leadership, both on the committee level and for the entire House and Senate, so that they know that Iowans think that this is a bad idea. Iowa has the second highest incident rates of cancer. It is one of only 2 states with a rising cancer incidence rate. The way to solve that problem is not by providing a shield for pesticide companies whose products may cause cancer. So Uh, Dan, with that, I want to hand it back to you so that we can hear why, from the perspective of all sorts of Iowans, why this is a bad bill and hear more about the implications of this legislation. So, Diane, with that, I should, I think, pass it back to you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. That was a really good, clear explanation of why this bill is bad and why we got to be careful about it not coming back, because there are ways. Um, I next want to introduce Dr. Chuck Benbrook. Dr. Benbrook is an agricultural economist and pesticide litigation consultant, and he's testified in numerous lawsuits involving pesticides, including glyphosate, paraquat, and chlorpyrifos, if I said that right.
Mhm.
He's a former adjunct professor with the Center for Sustaining Agriculture and Natural Resources at Washington State University, and also the founder and former executive director of the Heartland Health Research Alliance. Dr. Benbrook has been very generous with his time and efforts, traveling around the state for the Iowa Farmers Union, for their cancer listening posts, and in joining us here tonight. I heard him speak in Fairfield, and he really taught me a lot. So Dr. Benbrook will be sharing why this bill is so harmful in light of the significant health risks of pesticides. So Dr. Benbrook, thank you for being with us tonight.
And thank you to Diane for the invitation. I'm really delighted to continue my dialogue with Iowans, and I thank Aaron and Lehman and the Iowa Farmers Union for inviting me to do the speaking tour, which I enjoyed very much. Let me start by explaining why the pesticide industry and in particular Bayer, Monsanto, and Syngenta are investing so much money and effort in trying to pass these state immunity bills, get the immunity slash preemption issue back in front of the Supreme Court, uh, or change the rules governing pesticide litigation in a way that will shield them from liability for some of their behavior in the past. Starting about 20 years ago, uh, there was a shift in the focus of the environmental and consumer sustainable ag community to work on biotech issues. It was the starting in the mid 1990s. It really was where most of the focus went. In the 20 years before that, it was on pesticide regulatory decisions. So whether Roundup would be registered for use on all sorts of crops, and what would be the conditions, and was it a carcinogen or was it not a carcinogen? But starting in the mid 1990s, the most of the focus of the community of people trying to encourage safer technology in agriculture shifted to biotech. And as a result, all of the chemical company representatives in Washington that were there and to interact with the EPA basically didn't have any opposition to speak of. And the companies, the registrants, gained the ability to really find a way to convince EPA to allow whatever uses of a particular pesticide the company felt that they could make money from. And uh, over the last 20 years, the registrants have developed a set of tactics and tools that they deploy to work their will with the EPA. They know what it takes to get EPA to say yes, and they also know how to discourage and usually prevent EPA from imposing regulatory restrictions on them that they are not willing to accept because they feel it'll cut into their market share. So how did they do this? How do these representatives of the registrants that wander the halls of EPA, how do they do it? Well, they do it by obfuscating the data that they've submitted to the agency that often actually does show some potential for risk. They do it by discouraging the agency scientists from paying attention to peer-reviewed literature. They do it, by offering alternative explanations for why a particular study might have reported a link between use of paraquat and Parkinson's disease or Roundup and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the registrants have really taken this tactic of theirs way beyond what would be regarded as ethical. And they've gotten away with it for about 20 years. But when the litigation started, in the case of Roundup in 2016, and it wasn't too long after, that was about the same time that the first paraquat Parkinson's disease litigation was going forward. What happens in litigation is that the experts working on behalf of the plaintiffs, which could be a farmer that has gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or a farmer with Parkinson's disease, you get access to all of the emails of Syngenta or all of the emails of Monsanto, of their regulatory officials, their scientists, their communications people, and you see their own internal planning documents that say how they were going to convince EPA not to put on Roundup labels, for example, a requirement that when you're mixing and loading a concentrate Roundup product on your farm, you should wear gloves. It's kind of common sense, but Monsanto has effectively fought that label provision for many years. It's on only a few labels, and then it's only under certain conditions. But what's happened in the litigation is that juries have been presented the evidence of what the companies were thinking about the safety or lack thereof of their products. And in fact, there have been some pretty extended debates inside these companies about whether they were responsibly labeling, responsibly formulating, and responsibly marketing the products. And when someone who used a lot of paraquat over several years and has Parkinson's disease gets Syngenta, into court, and the attorneys representing them show all of these internal communications where Syngenta is trying to convince the EPA that the published science out there that shows a clear connection between exposure to paraquat and Parkinson's disease just should be ignored, or, oh, it raises interesting issues that more research should be done on, but don't regulate the product, for heaven's sake. Don't ban the product. When that information comes out, that's when they get hit with these large punitive damage awards in litigation. I've been involved with the Roundup litigation from the beginning. I testified at the first trial. Lee Johnson, a groundskeeper for a Northern California school district, he for 3 years he'd sprayed a lot of Roundup on 7 different school campuses. He had 2 massive exposure episodes, and in only 2 years he got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, after the jury had heard about Monsanto's behavior and how Monsanto had systematically and consciously kept EPA from understanding the science, the jury was, I guess, kind of pissed off because they awarded him $250 million in punitive damages. This is one person. And so the pesticide industry sees this same thing coming across a wide range of products because they know that they have found ways to bring EPA around to their view of the science. And they've found ways to block EPA from putting weight on independent science done by scientists at Iowa State University or Penn State or wherever. And this is why this campaign around the states has been so intense and will continue. Because they don't want to be held accountable for the tactics and success that they've had in preventing EPA from even common sense changes on labels, like put a label on the Roundup label. I wish they had done this. If you have cancer or are in remission from cancer, avoid any contact with this product because many of the plaintiffs in the litigation went through 4, 5, 6 rounds of chemo, each time going back, having remission, and the disease comes back, and then they go back spraying, and 8 months or 12 months down the road, the disease is back. They have another round of chemo, and several of them then would have to have a stem cell transplant, which usually worked for a while, but even some people that went through several rounds of chemo, a stem cell transplant, went back to spraying Roundup after they felt good enough after the stem cell transplant, and some of them have died as a result, or are back with the disease. So there should have been put on the label, if you've already gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from spraying Roundup, after you're treated and in remission, it's probably not a great idea to start spraying it again. But the Monsanto would never allow a provision like that onto a label, and that's really what this fight is about. The companies have become too powerful and too influential within the EPA, and they're not formulating as safe a product as they could. Remember, U.S. Roundup was banned in Europe in 2016. They had to reformulate it to make it much safer, which they did. And they also put additional provisions on the label. So that's what's at stake. And if this legislation goes through or the Supreme Court changes the laws, then Iowa farmers and rural citizens and really everybody in the country is going to depend on the EPA getting it right when they issue a federal label. But there's no reason to place a lot of confidence in that because the industry at this point has kind of captured the agency and knows how to work its will. So that's the context in which this fight that's going on still in Iowa is so important. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Dr. Benbrook. I'd say it's really sad to see, you know, the callousness of the industry in terms of people's health and what they could be doing versus what they are doing. And it's just not right. It's not right. So thank you for everything that you're doing to bring this information out to the public because it's very important for people to know. And the thing about this pesticide bill, it's not, it's like any side effect that could be found in a new, if this bill were to pass, any side effect that's found in a new chemical or chemical that is like down the road becomes obvious, the side effects become obvious that maybe they're not now. The pesticide companies would be, um, immune from liability, and that's not right either. All right. Well, that Modern Ag Alliance that I mentioned earlier has been trying to scare farmers into believing they're going to lose access to agricultural chemicals and that's going to portend the end of agriculture. But now we're going to feature two farmers who have not fallen for that propaganda. So the first farmer I want to introduce is Seth Watkins. He's a fourth generation farmer in Southwest Iowa. Pinhook Farm was established in 1848 by Seth's great-grandfather, and in 2025, Seth is raising a herd of Angus cattle, some chickens, a recently acquired herd of Katahdin sheep, and he's got several beehives. So he's got a thriving farm there. Seth attributes Pinhook Farm's success to prioritizing stewardship over production and building a system that works with nature. Now, I heard Seth's public comments shared during the Senate Judiciary Committee's public hearing, and honestly, I don't know why anyone would vote to pass this bill after they heard them. So Seth is going to share with us now why he, as a farmer, is opposed to the pesticide immunity bill.
All right, Diane, thank you for the introduction, and I hope everyone hears me all right. The easiest thing for me to do is simply share this letter that Tommy Hexter asked me to write when the study bill for this was introduced. When I looked at who would be listening, I realized that it was a committee of two Republicans and one Democrat. So I tried to write it in a nonpartisan way or something that I thought would appeal to both sides of the aisle. So you already know me. Here's the letter. I have seen recent articles and social media posts claiming that Senate Study Bill 1051, which is now Senate File 394, will protect Iowa farmers' ability to produce corn and soybean, and that without this legislation, the income I generate from my farm will be in peril. The perspective that I'm going to share is that the externalities caused by the chemicals being protected by this bill pose great risk to the health of my family, public health, the long-term viability of my farm, and the rural economy. My understanding of the threats and negative impact on farm income posed by farm chemicals begins with the birth of my daughter Tatum in 2004. Endocrine disruption of some kind had resulted in a complicated pregnancy known as monoamniotic monochorionic twinning. Tatum's sister did not survive the pregnancy, and Tatum had to be delivered by an emergency C-section because of an abdominal wall birth defect called an omphalocele. This condition alone is complex and life-threatening. In 2004, we did not have the data or understanding of the impact chemicals like atrazine, glyphosate, and nitrogen have on birth defects and cancer. Today, we know that atrazine is a proven endocrine disruptor and has a direct correlation to abdominal wall birth defects like Tatum was born with. Today, we also know that drinking water with nitrate above 5 parts per million has a proven association to thyroid cancer, an elevated risk of bladder cancer, and doubles the risk of a child being born with spina bifida. In addition, the University of Iowa research has shown that drinking water with nitrate above 3 parts per million doubles the risk of ovarian cancer. For the record, bladder cancer is listed as the cause of death on my father's birth certificate, and I have a sister who died of ovarian cancer. My family has no prior history of cancer. Iowa is now number 2 in the nation for incidence of cancer, and we are expected to pass the number 1 state, Kentucky, soon. And sadly, my family's story is becoming far too common with numerous Iowa farm families. The good news for our family is that today Tatum is doing great and is in her second year at Grinnell. She is a great student and could have chosen any school in the country. She chose to stay in Iowa, and I'm very proud of her for this. Getting to this point has not been easy. The first 4 years of her life required numerous surgeries at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Insurance does not cover everything. My wife had to take extended leave from work, and I had to liquidate cattle and equipment to pay the bills and keep my farm intact. But for as hard as this was for my family, I knew I was fortunate. You see, at the same time Tatum was going through her surgeries, another family in our county had a young son who was battling cancer. They were also racking up medical debt from lost income due to caring for their child. When it was over, they lost their son and their farm. And this is the real impact of farm chemicals on farm income. So when I see this bill, I want to remind you that you can't be pro-life and pro Senate Study Bill 1051. We know better, and I believe it's safe to say that the corporations and organizations supporting this legislation know better as well. President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has successfully sued Monsanto, now Bayer, and is helping thousands of people suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma caused by glyphosate receive compensation for the financial loss they have incurred from using this product. This money doesn't make anyone rich. It pays hospital bills, mortgages, tuition, and groceries for families who have lost wages from not being able to work for themselves or having to leave work to take care of a child or a parent. There is a flip side to the concern of loss of farm income being promoted by supporters of this bill. This is the improvement in farm income thousands of farmers across our state are seeing and finding ways to reduce chemical and synthetic fertilizer needs. By learning and applying regenerative farming practices, farmers are seeing cost reductions of $40 to over $100 an acre while maintaining and even increasing yields by reducing nitrogen use and chemical passes. Imagine saving $40 an acre on Iowa's 25 million acres of crops. This is nearly $1 billion or $10 million that could stay in every county in Iowa instead of being exported to purchase chemicals, equipment, and fertilizer from other states and countries. Those dollars could stay local, building an ever stronger rural Iowa. I urge you to put the health and well-being of your constituents and Iowa's communities first by rejecting this bill and supporting Secretary Kennedy in holding the chemical companies accountable to make America healthy again. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Seth. It's a very moving, it's a very moving letter, and I'm sorry they didn't take it seriously enough, but
I didn't intend to play the Trump card like that, but I thought that the way things are, I was kind of interesting that uh, it seems to me the chemical companies meant more to these guys than their their president. I'm baffled by all of it.
yeah, yeah, you're not the only one. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry your family had to go
Yeah.
through what it did.
Well, we're doing well, and Tatum's doing great, and it's just I feel bad that she had to go through some of those things, but you do look at these companies are not talking about the financial impact this has on families when something like this happens. And
Hmm.
when you go through Iowa, my wife worked for the AEA through her whole career in the homes with different families. There are clusters of people with these issues. We have, disproportionate cases of spina bifida. We have uh, Tatum's condition is very rare, and yet there's another child in her class that had the same condition. I think the only reason it wasn't really tracked is where we live. Tatum was born in Omaha, and her friend was born in Des Moines. So tracking is part of this, and that's where I'm really careful to point out, it's pointing fingers is a sign of a failing system, but gathering data and understanding how your system works is how you move forward. So trying to bury this stuff only hurts us. And I think as I've started my journey and how I farm, seeing some of the money that I was shipping to these folks that I didn't have to. I mean, if we're serious about rural economic development, we've got to get serious about farming in nature and having a healthy environment.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So I am now going to introduce another farmer, Wade Dooley. He's a sixth generation farmer in Marshall County. He operates Glenwood Century Farm, which is a diversified crop and livestock operation, and he focuses on raising cover crop seed. Wade also owns Dooley Ag Stewardship that offers custom cover crop seedling services and seed. So Wade is going to speak out also that as a farmer, why he's opposed to the bill. Wade, thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, Seth's always a tough act to follow. He's a lot more eloquent than I am, and he really brings it home about how dangerous it is to just let the companies do what they want. Um, so, quick overview for me: I'm a conventional farmer, and I use various herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides on my cropland, around my barnyards, and in my storage bins to control different problems and pests. But I do try to minimize my use as much as I can. We changed a lot of our cropping systems over the last 10, 15 years and have done a lot more with reducing our use and reliance on these products. But that doesn't mean we don't use them. We still use them in a lot of different places. The rhetoric around how this bill was going to jack our prices up and make it impossible to grow crops was complete and utter bull. There was no basis in fact on that. The companies make so much money on farmers that getting sued now and then doesn't really hurt them that much. but it looks bad for their shareholders, and that's what matters most to them. These companies are so large, they have so much money. They have more money than God and more lawyers than Jesus. And because of that, I see no reason why we should protect them more than we protect Iowa citizens who don't have teams of lawyers waiting in the ranks to back them up when they need it. We've got so many people in our communities that have all kinds of health issues. Some of them are caused by these products, some of them are not. But the simple fact is there's no reason to protect companies that won't protect us, that they don't need our help. We need our help. And I just don't understand why our legislature is so strong on protecting businesses that aren't even based here. They're not Iowa companies. They're not manned by Iowa people at the top. The ones who make the decisions aren't here. They never will be. They don't care about us. They don't know us. And yet the legislature wants to protect them more than they want to protect their own neighbors and their own children. This is why I oppose this bill, because we don't need to protect these companies. They don't have a soul. They don't care about us. And if they lost the entire state of Iowa on their books, it wouldn't really affect their global portfolio that much. So we don't need to protect them. We need to protect ourselves a lot more. And we need our legislators to back us and to do what we need them to do. And that's why I oppose this bill, because it's completely unnecessary. It gives protections in the wrong places to the wrong people. And I don't know how these guys keep thinking they're going to push it through and make it happen, but they do have all of the money. So we need to have all the manpower to back it and get it knocked down. And someday, maybe we'll get it beat to the point where they just quit. But I'm guessing we get to fight this fight for a long, long time. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Wade. That is really well said. Um, yeah. And that's why we're here tonight, because we're going to just keep working at this and face it. And you're right, we need to be protecting ourselves because they're looking at their interests, but they're not looking at ours. So that brings us to what I want to talk about now is our script, what we're going to be doing on Wednesday. And I am going to share my screen here. Let me just pull this up because I just want to go over the script with everyone. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. So we have a very simple script for this lobby date because we want our legislators to get the full message. So basically what we're going to ask you to do is when you call your legislator to identify yourself, if you're in any of these categories, you identify your name and where you're from, obviously, but if you're a farmer, identify yourself as a farmer. If you're a cancer survivor, identify yourself as a cancer survivor. If you're a farmer and a cancer survivor, tell them that. If you're a constituent of one of these four legislators we're going to be targeting, tell them that. And also that you're an Iowan very concerned about Iowa's high cancer rates. So any and all configuration of those, identify yourself as such because that is really going to really frame why you're calling. Okay. So the script I said is very simple. My name is Diane Rosenberg. I live in Fairfield. I am an Iowan, very concerned about Iowa's high and rising cancer rates. I'm deeply concerned about the possible reintroduction of the pesticide immunity bill. I remain steadfastly opposed to this bill in any form. This bill is harmful to farmers and everyone affected by the use of any pesticides, and I urge you to oppose this bill. So that's the basic script that we came up with. You can make it your own. You can change it up, make it your own. We have a second page here that has all these different talking points, what the pesticide bill does, why it's harmful, what it doesn't do, and all of that. So you can create your own form, your own message. We're going to be putting this in the chat, and so and I'm also going to be emailing this to everybody tomorrow. Everybody that has registered for this briefing will get a copy of this script tomorrow. If you create your own comments, keep it short and brief. You're likely going to get the switchboard and leaving a message, so shorter and more brief is good. And also keep your comments respectful because you want legislators to hear you. Even though you might be mad, you want legislators to hear you. You don't want to get tuned out. So let's talk about who we're targeting. Oh, one other thing. So I have in here possible reintroduction of the bill. Right now, as of tonight, the bill has not been reintroduced as far as we know. We're closely monitoring the situation. If the bill is introduced before Wednesday or by Wednesday morning, we will send out an email and let everybody know. And then you can just modify and take out possible, you know, and and just kind of modify it according to the current status. Um, so as Aaron said, we're targeting people that are in leadership positions. And in the House, that would be uh, House Speaker Pat Grassley, and also Representative Bobby Kaufman. He's the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. And one of the ways the bill could be reintroduced is through an appropriations bill, because that can be reintroduced anytime after the second funnel, when all other legislation stops unless it's met certain requirements for being moved on. But an appropriations bill can be introduced in any time until the last moment of the session. Okay. And it could be introduced in some other bill, as Aaron said, be connected and, attached to some other bill. So that's why we're targeting Grassley and Kaufman in the House. Plus, it appears that Grassley may have some additional political aspirations and probably doesn't want a whole lot of negative attention on him. So, this could be a way to discourage him from moving the bill forward. In the Senate, we're going to be targeting Mike Busalat. He was the Senate bill manager and the chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee, which initially passed the bill out of subcommittee. He definitely has some political aspirations. I saw this afternoon that he's exploring a run for governor in 2026. So he also will not want to have too much negative, attention surrounding him. And we're also targeting Senator Dan Dawson. He's the Senate Ways and Means Chair, again, appropriations through the Senate. We have for Representative Kaufman and Senator Dawson two phone numbers outside of the switchboard numbers. We got them from the Iowa Campaign Commission, whatever it was called. When a legislator runs whenever it runs a particular year, they have to supply all this information, and that's how we could get those personal numbers. I don't know if they're cell phones or if they are home phones. I recommend that you call those first, because if it's a cell phone, you get a more direct connection. But if it appears to be a home phone, then I would recommend just calling the switchboard and leaving a message. The switchboard, every time I've called, the people answering it have been pretty good about taking my full message. And that's one of the reasons we've kept these messages short as well. After you make your call, if you do have a little extra time, we would recommend sending an email to these legislators as well, just to make sure we're crossing all our T's and dotting all our I's, that they get these messages from us. And then after you make your calls on Wednesday, and you can call anytime during the day on Wednesday, we have a link to a Google form that we've put together where you can report in on your calls, like how your calls went. And so if you were able to connect with them or not, or just anything that you could tell us that would be helpful for us to know. That kind of information can be really valuable for us as we're going through. And so you can get to it either by the Bitly link or this QR code. And again, when I send out the script, I'll also be sending out the the link for that form. Okay, so that's that. So now we'll take maybe about 10 minutes to answer any of your questions. We'll bring you all back, so anybody that wants to be on video, um, you know, and if you have any questions, I ask that you just raise your hand, and and that'll be the easiest way for us to, moderate.
Diane, there was some comments in the chat that maybe you want to go through
Okay.
first, and then we could go with people raising their hands after. There was
Okay.
something from Mary Ellen Miller that was, I think, a really good one that you could
Okay.
talk about.
Let me see. So Mary Ellen says, it was a comment. This was a reply to her email to Amy Sinclair, Senator Sinclair. Oh, Mary Kirkpatrick, maybe that's. Can you tell us where the four legislators are located within with the information you sent us? So, which districts? Um, Off the top of my head, I don't know. Debbie, can I ask you to do a little bit of Googling? Is that something that maybe you can do to find, we
Yeah,
could find out what
I
district?
can handle that.
And maybe put it in the chat. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so the bill does not provide any immunity against legal action due to all other potential causes of action. A person who's been harmed by any products has full access to legal recourse to collect damages. In addition, all other potential causes of action remain actionable, including strict liability, design, defect, negligence, fraud, misrepresentation, suppression, non-disclosure, et cetera, et cetera. Can we please discuss appropriate responses to the above points? Would one of our speakers like to do that? Chuck, would that be something, Dr. Benbrook, would that be something you'd like to answer?
I just put in the chat a request to Mary Ellen if I'd really like to get a copy of the email she received from the senator. It is true that other courses of action, gross negligence or state uh, uh, liability laws can be used to when bringing pesticide litigation, like what we've seen and like what the industry is trying to stop. But the failure to warn uh, basis for litigation is probably the most important because it's the one that requires the companies, the registrants, to behave responsibly and honestly report to the EPA and honestly label their products in a way that gives users the kind of information that they need. It's um, the the EPA in granting a federal label assumes that people are going to use a product uh, in a safe and disciplined way in accord with the label. But as we all know, when you're out doing a job, spraying a particular pesticide, things happen that are unusual. Weather can be different. You can have a leaky hose or a valve that breaks, and you can get exposed. So there are things that can happen that do pose a risk. And if the companies have not provided users with uh, responsible and effective guidance to minimize their health risks. That's what makes them vulnerable.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question from Mary Ellen. I think you need to unmute yourself and then you can ask your question. Mary Ellen Miller.
Thanks, Diane. I was trying to put it in the chat for Charles. What I don't understand, because I'm not a lawyer, what is the opposition to expanding the labeling with more detail? Does that just make them more vulnerable to lawsuits? And exactly what does the Senate file bill ask the company to change? I'm not clear on that. I try to read this bill and it's just, and I can't really figure out what the bill wants to do. So if someone could explain that or clarify that. But right now, what I'm hearing is that people somehow are thwarted in their ability to sue for harm. Is that, and that if they put more specifics on the label, there's more way for them to be sued? I'm very confused by this.
I can probably help you out a bit there. When chemical companies do a thorough job of adding cautionary statements and warnings onto their label about certain situations that could pose higher risk, that actually limits their exposure to future liability because they have honestly and thoroughly alerted users to potential high risk. I mean, let's say Aaron Lehman's farm is in a part of Iowa with karst geography, and rainfall goes right down through that karst geography into the groundwater, and his family's well is pulling out of that groundwater, and he's got 15 parts per million of atrazine in his drinking water that his family has been drinking. If the companies don't alert users to be careful in using the product in an area with karst geography and heightened risk of groundwater contamination, when they know that their herbicide's a leacher, that's the kind of thing that makes them vulnerable. So, and one other really important point for all the farmers out there, the current Supreme Court guidance on this dates back to a 2004 litigation brought by pea farmers in Texas who used a Dow AgroSciences herbicide that carried over longer than it was supposed to in certain soil types. And when the farmers planted their next crop, the herbicide was still active and killed it, and they lost a lot of money. So they sued Dow AgroSciences for failure to warn them about the fact that they need to take their soil pH and organic matter levels into consideration relative to how long the herbicide would persist in the soil, and that Dow had in fact failed to warn about this. And the Supreme Court sided with the farmers and said that the companies have the best and deepest knowledge about their product. They are responsible for putting things on their label to avoid high risk scenarios. And it could be a high risk of a failure to control the pest or create some other environmental problem on a farm or in a farming area, or a failure to warn about a health risk like damage to DNA that can lead to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Dr. Benbrook, I wanted to ask you if you could take just a moment and explain about the why Bayer is not changing the glyphosate formulation in the United States, even though they've changed it in Europe, and what that, when you talked about that surfactant, like why that's dangerous in the United States, and if you could explain that whole thing, because I think that's really telling and interesting.
I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. So basically all Roundup sold in the US since 1974 has contained a POEA surfactant, a polyetoxylated taloamine. This surfactant is critical because it makes the glyphosate stick on the surface of the weed long enough to move through the epidermis of the weed and get inside of the tissues of the weed, which is where it has to get to kill the weed. But over time, science has demonstrated clearly that the POA surfactants, when spray solution lands on the skin of a farmer or an applicator, that surfactant does the same thing and accelerates the movement of the glyphosate in the spray solution through the epidermis, the skin of a person, and into their bloodstream. And once in the bloodstream, it's almost immediately being pumped through your bone marrow, into and through your bone marrow. And your bone marrow is where the hematopoietic stem cells are producing all of your new red and white blood cells and platelets every day, like billions of new cells every day. That's a lot of DNA replication, a lot of cell division, and that's where the genotoxic impact of glyphosate can start cell growth on the way to leukemia or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or other health problems. In Europe, the European regulators were very concerned about the clear evidence of damage to DNA from Roundup with POA surfactants, which Monsanto sold in Europe through the end of 2016. But the European regulators told Monsanto about 2013 that they were going to ban POA-based Roundup. So Monsanto worked out an arrangement, an agreement with the European regulators to phase POAs out and phase in a safer surfactant. It falls in the family of the quaternary ammonia products. And they did that. So, and it wasn't just Monsanto glyphosate-based herbicides, it was all the other companies that also used POAs. So starting January 1, 2017, Roundup in Europe was 20 to 50 times safer than Roundup sold in the US. Monsanto decided not to switch to the safer surfactant in North America and in South America. In fact, they haven't made the switch in any part of the world other than Europe, where regulators required it. And they had a couple of reasons. First of all, it was going to increase the cost of the surfactant by about 25%. So it would be pennies, per gallon of formulated Roundup. But also, there wasn't enough supply in 2016 to switch all of the Roundup in Europe, plus all the Roundup in North America and in South America. But of course, over a 3 or 4 year period, Monsanto could have created the additional production capacity and made the switch, but they still haven't done it in the U.S. And one of the real smoking gun documents in the litigation was an email from one of the European scientists that worked on the switch in Europe, and he was trying to convince his colleagues in St. Louis to do it in other parts of the world. And he put in an email, I swear to God, he put in an email which juries see multiple times in a trial, something to the effect of, why should we keep making a hazardous product when we know how to make a safer one? And you can imagine the impact that one line has on a jury. And that's one of the reasons that Monsanto wants to make this litigation go away, because it's really brought to the fore how irresponsible they've been. Iowa farmers should not worry a second about losing the access to glyphosate-based herbicides, because they are effective and they are safer than almost all other herbicides. But they can be formulated safer, they can be labeled and much more safely, and farmers need to be told it's not safe enough to drink. You don't want to get it all over your hands or all over your legs and not do anything about it for, until you get home and take a shower. It's really, Roundup has been marketed and stewarded in a very irresponsible way.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Benbrook. We're starting to a little bit beyond our time here, so I think we'll wrap up the question section. I wish we had a little more time for everyone. If you've got a question that we can't answer right now, if you could put it in the chat. We're going to save the chat and we will get an answer to you, tomorrow. I have one more speaker that I want to introduce, and that is Matt Russell. So Matt is a fifth generation family farmer. He grew up on a farm in Cass County. He co-owns and operates Coyote Run Farm in Lacona. Matt is the former state executive director of the USDA Farm Service Agency, a former staff member of the Drake Agricultural Law Center, and is currently the interim executive director of the Iowa Farmers Union. And Matt is going to tell us basically why it's so important we make these calls on Wednesday. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Thank you for everybody that has joined tonight, and thank you for everyone who's going to be making those calls. This is really important. If you're reading the news, if you're paying attention, we are in this real battle of not just ideas, but of power and influence in our democracy. And when we make calls to our elected leaders, it is significant. This bill is dead, right, in the House, but not necessarily because these things resurface. That is because people called. That is because people showed up. That is because people went to the Capitol and lobbied. So these representatives need to keep hearing from us that we are paying attention. And this information that you're going to share on Wednesday is really, really critical. It's the truth. You've just heard from farmers. You've heard from Chuck, an expert who understands at a very deep level what the game is that these chemical companies are playing. So make those calls. They are incredibly important. One call doesn't make much of a difference, but we can't get to lots of calls unless we all make those calls. So your one call, joined with everybody else's, is truly the difference between us preventing Bayer and Syngenta ChemChina and Corteva from getting these protections at the cost of farmers and Iowans. So thanks for all you do. I'll turn it back to you, Diane.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much for that, and underscored many times. So I really want to thank everyone for being here tonight, for taking the time. I want to thank Dr. Benbrook, Aaron, Matt, Wade, and Seth. You gave us a lot to think about, and a lot of good information to take with us when we make our calls on Wednesday. Again, I'll be sending out the links tomorrow. This was live streamed. I encourage you to share it with your networks, and encourage other people to join you on Wednesday's Four Calls Lobby Day. If there's a question we didn't get to, please put it in the chat. We're going to save that chat, and we'll try to get you. I have your email from your registering for this Lobby Day briefing, so I can get to you tomorrow. And again, we'll be sending out the script and the Google form for reporting in, on your calls. So thank you all. Let's get on the phones. Let's keep this bill dead and gone for the rest of the year. And thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.